Can anybody hear me? If anybody can hear me, if you can just text something in the chat box. Good evening to anybody who's already logged on for this evening's webinar. If you can hear me, if you can just type a message in the chat box, that'd be great. I'm going to get started in about 10 minutes or so. Good evening to anyone who's already signed on for tonight's webinar. We're going to get started here in about 10 minutes. And if you can hear me okay, if you want to just post something in the chat box to let me know you can hear me and that you can see my screen. Good evening to anybody who's already signed on for tonight's webinar. I'm just waiting for more people to come in. We should get started right around 7. If you can hear me and you can see my screen, or if you can't do either of those, if you want to post a message in the chat box for me, that'd be great. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to double check, test my sound, test the view. If anybody can hear me or see my screen, if you can just post a message in the chat box, that'd be great. And we'll get started here just shortly around 7. Perfect. So I see in the question box that people can hear me and everyone can see my screen. That's wonderful. So we'll just sit tight for a little bit longer and wait for some more people to log on. Oh, we just had a message that it appears the chat box is not working. So we'll just use the question box for now, and I'll try to make sure that I catch everything. I'll probably look at most of the questions at the end of the webinar. So that's great. I'm glad everybody can hear me and see me okay. Well, so I just see a question that you're not able to see me. That's okay. I'm actually going to be sharing my screen with you this evening, so you'll be seeing the PowerPoint presentation as opposed to myself. Thank you for your patience. We're just going to wait a few more minutes just to get some more people online live. Get started in a few minutes. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see everyone signed on already. We're just going to wait another minute or two to get some more people on here live, and then we'll get started. All right, so I think that we'll go ahead and get started with tonight's webinar. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Kate Orlando. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist at NutriChem here in Ottawa, and I work at the Saint Laurent location. And I've been working with NutriChem for just over about a year and a half now, coming close to 2 years. I work with a really great team of holistic nutritionists, naturopathic doctors, and clinical pharmacists, as well as a great team of health advisors on the floor and great pharmacy staff. So it's a real treat to work for such a great company. And it's a real pleasure to be able to join you this evening and teach you a little bit about the what, the when, and how to eat for exercise. So for those of you that I have not met before, I graduated from CSNN, so the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, back in 2010. After graduation, I moved to Vancouver and I started working for a local health food store in the supplement department as a health advisor. And I've basically been in the industry since then, working as a consultant and then with NutriChem working as a practicing nutritionist. I am a marathon runner as well as a trail runner. It's a new passion of mine that I recently discovered, and it's safe to say I'm hooked. For those of you that are already active, you probably know that exercise is addictive, and it's a great drug to be addicted to. Lots of positives as opposed to negatives attached to that. And I'm actually headed to Boston in April to run the marathon for the first time. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm pretty nervous as well. But mainly one of the reasons that I wanted to do this webinar is because since I qualified, I realized that I really need to pay closer attention to not only how I train, but how I eat and how I fuel my body and how I take care of my body so that I can make sure that I get to race day healthy, strong, and full of energy. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. If you have any questions, you can type them in as we go along, or you can save them till the end and we'll have a bit of a question and answer period at the end. So, why should we exercise? I think we all know that we should exercise, but do we really know and understand why our doctors and our family members recommend it to us? One of the main reasons is that it's really good for heart health. It's really important to support your cardiovascular system, and exercise is one of the major ways to stay on top of that. It's also really good for brain health. It helps with focus and concentration. So it's really good for clearing your mind, sorting through thoughts, but also staying sharp and on point. Blood sugar balance. People who are physically active tend to have better insulin management, basically blood sugar balance. Their insulin and blood sugar works more efficiently in the body. Balancing healthy cholesterol levels. Exercise is really, really good for that. And of course, it all goes hand in hand with diet. Mood. Exercise is a wonderful mood regulator. It really helps get your endorphins going, and if you're frustrated about something, you can take it out in a positive physical way. Body composition. This is definitely something that a lot of people, one reason that people exercise is to improve body composition. And this doesn't mean losing weight specifically, but just perfecting the body that you do have. And a lot of people do also exercise for weight loss. So performance is directly related to how we fuel our bodies. And as we get older, or our training changes, our end goal changes, our level of competition changes, this becomes more apparent. When we're younger, we can go for a 10K run and it's no big deal. But as we get older, our body slows down a little bit and we require more fuel in order to do the same tasks that we were able to do so easily before. So it doesn't matter whether you're new to exercise or whether you've been exercising for years and you do Ironmans 3 times a year. What you eat will directly affect how you're able to perform, which will affect how you're able to progress, which can affect your motivation and your enjoyment of the activity. I have some clients who are new to exercise and they've never really enjoyed it in the past, but if they eat well, fuel well, have more energy for the exercise that they're doing, then they'll enjoy it more and they'll be more motivated to stick with it and keep going. One of my favorite saying is that if you want to live like an athlete, you have to eat like one. And it's easy to get off track, but as long as you have a goal in mind, it's easy to stay on top of it. So some simple principles of how to eat healthy for exercise. You want to eat a whole nutrient-dense diet. So we're going to go over the different macronutrients a little bit later on, but you want to make sure that you're eating fresh foods, you're rotating the colors, you're eating nutrient-dense foods, so not processed foods, and you're eating a good variety. You want to drink a lot of clean water, and so that doesn't mean that you have to go out and buy bottled water, but just as long as your water is a clean source. You want to make sure that you're drinking water all day long. It's very important to stay hydrated as you're exercising, as you're sweating more, but it's very important to stay hydrated before and after. You want to drop the sugary refined products. So a lot of products for athletes that you'll see in sports stores and supplement shops are full of sugar, and they're very detrimental to your performance. So we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. Limit the caffeine. So there's a lot of sports supplements out there that are pretty high in caffeine, and it's not that a little bit isn't bad for you, but if you're consuming high amounts of caffeine daily, it can have long-term detrimental effects on your adrenals, as well as losing minerals through excess urination. You want to focus on eating and digesting. So basically, athletes tend to have slightly slower digestion because if you're physically active on an ongoing basis, then a lot of your energy is going towards that as opposed to digestion. So you want to basically try to digest your foods as well as possible. So that means taking time to sit down and eat, focus on digesting, don't do anything else while you're doing that, while you're having your meal, and that way you'd be able to digest more thoroughly. Don't go too long without eating. This can leave you with low energy, low fuel. It's a good idea not to go more, like 3 hours would be the max, but ideally you wouldn't want to go more than 2 hours without having something like a good nutrient-dense snack. Have healthy snacks handy. This is a really good way to avoid grabbing those convenience foods, those nutrient-void packaged foods that are, you're hungry, you're low energy in the afternoon, you need something. If you have a thing of trail mix in your desk, or if you have some fruit handy, something like that, it's going to be a much better option than whatever you pick up at a store. Don't skip meals. This tends to, you see people skipping breakfast or skipping lunch or skipping dinner and going straight to the gym after work. It's not a good idea. You're basically not giving your body the fuel it needs for the exercise or for the workout. So you're just doing yourself a disfavor in that regard. Some additional principles to keep in mind. You want to take care of your immune system. The more physically active you are, the more run down your body gets, so to speak, and your immune system is what's going to fight off colds and flus and things like that. So making sure that you're eating lots of antioxidants, taking lots of good probiotics through your diet and through supplement, and just making sure that you're taking care of your body. Getting some sun, vitamin D, really, really beneficial for bone health, but it's also really good for performance. You just want to make sure that you are wearing sunscreen. You want to get a good night's sleep every night. And this is going to be different for everyone, so not everybody needs exactly 8 hours. Some people do well with 6, some people do well with 9. Just have to find out what feels really good for you, how you feel refreshed in the morning, and make sure that you're trying to get that quality sleep in every night. And you want to make sure that you take days off and that you relax. It's pretty easy to, like I said, get addicted, and you don't want to miss a day, or the weather conditions are perfect for a nice long run, but you really need to give your body a break every now and again, and it gives your muscles a chance to sort of relax, repair, it gives your body time to really replenish your fuel stores, and it also gives your body just a time to sort of sit back, think about the exercise or the workouts that you're doing, and then get back at it a day later. So some ways to stay on track. These are just simple things basically for anybody who's trying to follow a specific diet plan or an exercise regime. You want to make sure that you're planning your meals in advance. So some people like to sit down on a Sunday, they plan out their grocery list, they go grocery shopping, they come home and they prep their meals for the week, and then they're good to go. So that means that if they're stuck late at work, or they can't make it to the gym or something like that, they have their foods all taken care of. They don't have to worry about that. They're not going to have to grab something like quick on the way home. You know, you're having a good nutrient-dense meal. Try new recipes. This is a really good way to, first of all, try new foods, but also just to change it up a little bit. I find some of my clients, when they switch over to an exercise or an active lifestyle, they tend to think that they can only eat, you know, salmon with broccoli and brown rice, and they tend to eat the same food a couple times a week. And that's okay if you're eating good nutrient-dense foods, but you really need a variety. You need to rotate those vegetables so you're getting lots of colors in there. You need to rotate your protein source so you're getting different blends of amino acids, and you really want to make sure that you're just changing it up so you don't get bored. Getting a friend on board, this is a really good way to ensure accountability, whether for you or for the friend. Joining a group is another way. If you're surrounded by like-minded people who are into the same thing or want to be into the same thing, it's going to make it a lot easier to stay on track. Choosing an activity that you enjoy. If you're new to exercise and you hate running and you decide that that's going to be your exercise, you're probably not going to enjoy it, and you're probably not going to stick with it. So choose something that you like. That might mean you have to visit, you know, different clubs, different gyms, try different workouts until you find something that you enjoy. Keeping a log of your workouts. This is important so that you can sort of see your progress, keep track of how physically active you are. And this goes hand in hand with food as well. If you keep a log of what you're eating, then you can look back on your workouts and look back at your food for the week and say, oh, I am missing something, or oh, I am exercising more than I thought. I do need to up my calorie count. Things like that. Scheduling. Scheduling is big. You're not going to skip a day of work because it's scheduled, so make your workouts scheduled as well. Make your meals scheduled. You don't have to be as regimented as some people like to be, and you know that can take the fun out of things and make you feel like you have this task you have to do. But if it's scheduled, if it's on the calendar, then you have to do it. It's non-negotiable. So guess what? Big surprise, no shocker here. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. One of the questions that I get asked frequently on a daily basis is, what should I eat before workout? What should I eat after a workout? How many calories should I consume? And there's no simple answer because it's going to be individual per person. It's going to depend on like, what exercise are you doing? What intensity are you doing? What is your goal? Where do you want to go with it? What types of food do you like? Do you have any specific styles of eating that restrict certain foods? Things like that. So you want to make sure that you find a style of eating that nourishes you and fuels you. So you want to make sure that it's balanced and healthy. You want to make sure that it keeps you healthy, that it doesn't make you sick, that you're not consuming something you're sensitive to or that's not good for you. You want to make sure it keeps you strong and keeps you happy, and that it fits into your lifestyle. Not all exercise is appropriate for everyone either, so obviously you want to get the green light from your doctor first. If you have recently been diagnosed with heart disease, you probably should not start training for an Ironman right away. That might not be the best approach. If you haven't exercised, if you've been pretty sedentary for a while, you might want to start off really slow and just build up to it. Eventually, you will get stronger and you will be able to increase your aerobic ability to go longer, to go harder, to go faster. But it does take time, and there's no rush at all. So as I mentioned before, try different exercises on for size, see what you like, make sure you enjoy it, schedule it, make sure it's part of your routine, and you don't have to compete. You can compete against yourself if you want, but you don't have to, be breaking any records or breaking any levels. All right, so let's jump into the what. We're going to start off with protein. I'm just going to go through a few slides here. And if you have any questions, maybe just jot them down. You can keep them to the end. There is a lot of information around sports nutrition, so this is a general overview. And we do get more in depth with specific things with specific clients depending on their needs and their requirements. So quality protein, it builds muscle mass. It also builds and repairs tissue. It's important for the production of neurotransmitters, immune cells, blood cells, and hormones. So the building blocks for protein are called amino acids, and there's 20 of them. 9 of them are considered essential amino acids, and what that means is that we have to get them from our diet because we can't make them ourselves. Complete proteins are proteins that contain all 9 of the essential amino acids. And so what that means is in order to build muscle mass, tissues, and hormones, we need to make sure that all 9 of those are present. So this is just, you guys are going to get a copy of the slides afterwards and a recording, so I'll just go over these really quickly. But there's a list here of the 9 essential amino acids, and then conditionally essential amino acids are considered essential during times of stress, and exercise is considered a time of stress. So we want to make sure that if we are exercising on a regular basis, that we are maintaining a good supply of all of these amino acids. You'll notice the ones that are highlighted in purple, those are your branched chain amino acids. And I'm sure you've all heard BCAAs before, and maybe you know what they are and maybe you don't, and that's okay. Branched chain amino acids make up about 1/3 of the protein pool, so they're pretty important as far as aminos go. There's a lot of exciting research being done right now on the BCAA leucine specifically, and its effect on recovery as well as fuel during exercise. So BCAAs play a significant role in protein synthesis, so the building of protein. It slows down the breakdown of protein during exercise, which is really important, and it can delay muscle glycogen depletion. So we're going to talk about these terms a little bit later, but muscle glycogen is your fuel. So BCAAs help slow the release of glycogen to help you hold on to your stores a little bit longer. So some sources of complete protein: fish, poultry, meats, eggs, hemp, quinoa, buckwheat, and I put protein powder in here as well because protein powders typically, if they're sold as a supplement, are complete proteins. So for people who can't have some of these other ingredients or other food sources, then it's a good option for them. So if you don't eat animal protein, that's okay. You can combine vegetarian or plant-sourced protein to make a complete protein, so you don't need to worry about missing out. But somebody who's vegetarian or vegan might be a good candidate for a protein powder, just to ensure that they are getting enough protein depending on their activity level. So grains tend to be deficient. So plant-based proteins, the reason you need to combine them is because they're typically missing one or more of the essential amino acids, meaning that they're not complete. So grains tend to be deficient in isoleucine and lysine. Legumes tend to be deficient in tryptophan and methionine. Nuts and seeds tend to be deficient in leucine. So you can see how you could combine the two or any combination of these to make sure you're getting all of the aminos. If somebody is exclusively using nuts and seeds as their protein source, then they could be very deficient in some of these other lacking amino acids. So you just want to make sure that you're eating a good balance, combining when possible to ensure that you're not missing out on any. So one of the most popular questions I get is how much protein do you need? And The answer is going to be different from person to person. So it's going to depend on training type. It's going to depend on training volume. So how often are you exercising? Training intensity, how hard are you exercising? Are you vegetarian or vegan? And do you have any food restrictions? Do you have any sensitivities or allergies or specific styles of eating that you're following that you need to be aware of? So typically the average person needs about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And when I say non-active, that's just to sustain regular daily activity. For athletes or people who are physically active, that number goes up anywhere from 1 to 2 and sometimes even up to 3 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, those recommendations are usually either dietitian, nutrition, or doctor recommended. We don't recommend that unless you're working with a trainer or dietitian, nutritionist, that you go over 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So another question is, do I need protein powder? So no, not everybody needs to use a protein powder, but it can be very handy because it's convenient, it's quick, and it's easy to prepare. And typically, as I mentioned before, they are complete proteins. So I mentioned for vegetarians or vegans, if they're having difficulty combining their plant proteins and they find that they're lacking, then they can use a protein powder. It can definitely help to bring up your protein intake for the week. So as far as protein powders go, the two most popular ones are whey and plant-based proteins. So whey is dairy-based, and there's 3 different forms. So there's whey isolates, whey concentrates, and there's also hydrolyzed whey protein. I'm just going to talk about the isolates and the concentrates here. They're more common than the hydrolyzed. And then with plant-based protein, the most popular ones are rice, pea, hemp, and then combinations. So for whey protein, if you don't have a dairy sensitivity or a lactose intolerance, then a whey protein might be a great option for you. It is a really good quality protein. It does contain all the BCAAs and it is very high in them. It does build muscle mass very well, and it does have immunoglobulins, which are very supportive and strengthening for your immune system. So those are found in whey concentrates. Whey isolates tend to be processed more to remove a lot of the other components of a whey protein. So the casein, the lactose, and a lot of the immune properties are usually removed in an isolate, which increases the protein content and makes it more tolerable for people who do have sensitivities or allergies to those other ingredients. Some of the cons with a whey protein is that dairy can be mucus forming for people. There's a lot of poor quality protein whey powders out there on the market, so you need to be really careful where you're buying it and the questions you're asking. They can have traces of hormones and antibiotics in them from the cows that it was sourced from. It can be inflammatory for some people, and then a lot of people do have allergies and sensitivities towards dairy products. So for plant-based protein, pros for this is that it's typically low allergenic. Now obviously, some people could be allergic to peas or to rice or have sensitivities to them or not digest them very well, so it might not be the best choice for them. It does build muscle mass, but it's at a slightly lower rate than a whey protein. It's less acidic and it can be easier to digest for people. The cons, although they do have all of the amino acids to be a complete protein, they should. They are typically lower in BCAAs. The rate of absorption of the amino acids is slower as well. And as mentioned, some of them are often missing one or more of the essential amino acids, which is why I typically recommend a blend of, let's say, rice and pea protein, or pumpkin seed and hemp protein, for instance. All right, so moving on to carbohydrates. Carbs are getting kind of a bad rap these days with the ever-growing popular paleo and ketogenic diets, and they are great diets for certain people, but like I said before, it's not one size fits all. It definitely depends on your choices and how you want to eat and how you want to fuel, and there might be a specific reason why you're following a specific diet, but for the sake of the webinar this evening, we're just going to go over all the macros equally. So for carbohydrates, our bodies and our mind run on carbs. That's basically, it's our preferred source of fuel, and we use it very efficiently. Not all carbs are created equal. I feel like everybody probably knows that now. There's a huge difference between eating a bowl of whole grain rice and eating refined white rice, or eating some whole grains in their whole form, or eating a piece of processed whole wheat bread. There's a big difference between that. And I don't know how many people are aware of this, but when we do eat carbs to excess, they can be stored as fat. So even though they are our preferred source of fuel and we do need them to survive, if we eat too much and we eat too much of the wrong carbs at the wrong time, then they can be stored as fat. So when carbohydrates are broken down, they are used either immediately for fuel, or they're converted and stored as glycogen, or as mentioned before, they can be stored as fat. So it's pretty important, like the first two that I highlighted here, used as immediate fuel and then converted to glycogen, are very important for exercise, because you want to make sure that you're using what you eat for fuel or storing it for fuel to use later. When we consume carbohydrates, they're broken down and they're absorbed in the small intestine, and if they're not used immediately, then they're converted to and stored as glycogen. And this is a process called glucogenesis, and they're either stored in the muscles or they're stored in the liver. And they're stored there so that we can use them when we need them during higher periods of exercise, or when we're going longer periods of time without food. When we exercise, the hormone adrenaline and glucagon are released, and they signal the breakdown of the glycogen into glucose, which is then used as fuel. So we can store approximately enough glycogen to sustain us for 12 to 14 hour period. So that means that our body's going to store enough glycogen that will be released as glucose for fuel for about 12 to 14 hours. However, if we exercise at a moderately intense pace, we could use the same amount of fuel in 2 hours. So this is why it's really important to make sure that you're replenishing your glycogen. So I had a question the other day about how long can you go without eating, like how long can you rely on your glycogen stores, basically was the question. And it is going to vary from person to person. It's going to depend on your training intensity, it's going to depend on your exercise, and it's also going to depend on how diligent you are at refueling. So typically, if you were to completely exhaust your glucogen or your glycogen supplies, it could take up to 24 hours to 4 days in order to completely replenish those stores. Now, you can see how if you're exercising day after day after day, and if you're not consuming enough carbohydrate to replenish those stores or to provide you with fuel as you're exercising, that you could easily become depleted in glycogen, which can definitely lead to lower energy, which can lead to fatigue, which can lead to injury. So we'll just touch briefly on this. There are three main energy systems in the body, and actually all three of them are used for exercise. So the first one is this phosphagen system, and that's basically using ATP, which is energy that's in your cells right there. So that's used in the first 10 seconds. That's the energy that you get when you're first starting your workout. It's first 10 seconds, that's the fuel that it's using. The glycogen lactic acid system lasts up to about 2 minutes. And then after that, your aerobic system takes over, and theoretically, it provides you with unlimited fuel. So any exercise that you're doing, you are going to go through those three systems, and all three of them do use carbohydrate for fuel. Now, the aerobic system does use fat as well, and people who are people who are athletic or people who do exercise are better equipped to use fat as fuel because they've trained their aerobic system. So some sources of carbohydrates. You're probably aware that there's two main forms. There's simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. And you do want to have a blend of both, and you want to consume them at different times. So good sources of simple carbohydrates would be some vegetables, fresh and dried fruit, and dates. And then sources of good quality complex carbohydrates would be brown and wild rice, quinoa, millet, amaranth, oats, sweet potatoes, and beans. Now, some people are very sensitive to beans because of the raffinose and lectins that are in there, so soaking them can help break that down and make them more digestible. And of course, vegetables. So nutrient void and high glycemic simple carbs to avoid. So this is, remember how I talked about how there's not all carbs are created equal. So these are some examples of foods that a lot of athletes are recommended to eat because they are a high source of carbohydrate, but they're void of nutrients. They don't provide sustained fuel, and they often come with highly refined processed sugar, additives, preservatives, colors, artificial flavors, and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of these products here I don't typically recommend, or if it is something that you're consuming, then you just want to eat them on a less frequent basis. All right, moving on to healthy fats. So healthy fats are important for anybody who's physically active, but mostly for all of us because it helps with muscle recovery. As I mentioned before, endurance athletes do burn fat very efficiently, so you need to make sure that you have enough fat in your body. They are required to make sex hormones. It does improve joint pain and reduces inflammation. And it does provide you with more fuel. So fat provides 9 calories per gram, whereas protein and carbohydrates provide 4 calories per gram. So there's different types of healthy fats, and I'm just going to go through them briefly. The first kind is a monounsaturated fat. There's an example here of some of them, so avocado, olive oil, almonds, pistachios, and these are high in oleic acid, which help keep your arteries strong. So anybody who's physically active needs a really good, strong cardiovascular system that works efficiently. And so if you have good integrity in your arteries, then you're going to have better blood pressure, better stroke volume, and you'll be able to exercise at a more efficient rate. Polyunsaturated fats, I'm sure we've all heard of omega-3 and omega-6. Omega-6, there's three main forms, the linoleic acid, the gamma-linoleic acid, and the arachidonic acid. Now, the first two are anti-inflammatory, and the third one is pro-inflammatory. So the North American diet tends to be quite high in omega-6, and unfortunately, a lot of foods are high in the inflammatory form. So we want to make sure that we're eating the good form and not the bad form. Omega-3s, alpha-linoleic acid, you can find those in fish, krill, squid, algae, walnuts, flax, hemp, and chia. Now, ALA is converted into, when we eat it from plant sources, our body converts it to EPA and DHA. Now, EPA and DHA are found naturally in fish, krill, and squid, and algae. So we don't need to do the conversion, which is nice. And they're very important for controlling inflammation. They support the brain and nervous function, support healthy adrenals, and promote sex hormones. They're also really good for cardiovascular support, good for mood, and they are also good for skin as well. So they're kind of all the way around good fats to have. Saturated fat. So carbs are getting the short end of the stick these days, and saturated fat used to get the bad end of the stick before, but there's a lot of talk now about the health benefits of saturated fat. So short chain fatty acids, they're good for the gut. They're quick fuel, and they do have some immune supporting properties, and these are found in milk, butter, and coconut oil. MCT, medium chain triglycerides, are good for the gut. They're great energy source as well, and they're easy to digest, and they do provide quick fuel. Coconut oil, palm oil are good sources of MCTs. LCTs, so the long chain triglycerides, are good for cell membranes and communication between nerves. but they are also really sticky, and they do play a role in clogged arteries or blood clots leading to clogged arteries. So you need to have a balance of these. So good LCTs are found in coconut oil, butter, and ghee, whereas bad LCTs, the ones you want to avoid, are found in trans fat laden foods like French fries, donuts, candy, fried chicken, things like that. So quality sources of healthy fat, extra virgin olive oil, flax oil, hemp oil. These should not be heated. So they're good to use in their raw state as long as they're cold pressed or expeller pressed. And you just make sure you don't want to heat them. Coconut oil is great to cook with because it does have a higher smoke point. You can cook with that, or you can cook with some organic butter or some ghee. Fish and fish oils are really good. Fish oil as a supplement, or you can just eat fatty fish. So salmon, trout, mackerel, those are really good examples of high omega-3 fatty acid fish. And then nuts. So walnuts are high in omega-3, so that's a good fat. Almonds are, I believe they're high in monounsaturated fats. Macadamia nuts, pecans, pine nuts, cashews. Thought I had Brazil nuts on there. Brazil nuts are high in selenium, which is really good for thyroid function. So that's another one that should have been on there as well. So how much of each? As I mentioned before, there's no one size fits all. So this is going to be different for everyone. Typically, you want your carbohydrates to make up about 40 to 60% of your total calorie count. You want your protein to be about 20 to 30%. And then your fat would be 20 to 30%. So this is, you can play with this. Everyone's going to be different, and you might feel better on the lower end of the carbohydrate, or you might feel better on the higher end of the carbohydrate. If your activity level or your intensity level is super high, you're exercising twice a day, 6-7 days a week, you might need to be on the higher end of things. And then how many calories to have each day? Again, there's no one size fits all. It's going to be different per individual, and that's really where you would want to sit down with somebody, assess your dietary and your lifestyle, and determine what would be the best caloric intake for you. What's your goal? Are you trying to gain weight? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to get leaner? Are you trying to get faster? Are you trying to basically just make changes to your diet? So moving on to electrolytes. So Dr. Emma Poland-McLeod had a great, and Adam Livingston, one of our pharmacists, had a great Facebook Live a couple nights ago talking about the importance of electrolytes and the difference between different electrolytes. So I highly recommend going to the NutriChem Facebook page and checking out the recording of that Facebook Live. It was fantastic. So electrolytes are really important for people who are physically active, basically anybody who's sweating, because you do lose minerals as you sweat. People who drink a lot of caffeine or caffeinated beverages like soft drinks lose a lot of their minerals to trying to buffer the acidity, to try to manage the pH. So anybody who consumes a lot of coffee, like more than 2 or 3 cups a day, you might need to look at electrolytes. So electrolytes, our muscles are considered to be electrical, and electrolytes carry an electrical charge, and they carry messages and instructions to the heart, to other muscles, and to nerve cells. So it's basically like the commuter in our body that tells our muscles and all of our pathways what to do. So they're involved in many automatic yet crucial processes in the body, and we can't live without them. So they regulate nerve and muscle function. They balance the water in your body. So if you have too much or too little, they help balance that. They balance the pH, and they help balance blood pressure. And then they move nutrients into the cells, and they help move waste out of your cells. So right now I'm hoping that some of you are thinking like, oh, that sounds really important. I hope I'm getting all my electrolytes in. So what are they? Sodium, calcium, potassium, chloride, and magnesium. These are the big guys. So like I said, Dr. Emma had a great discussion on the different types of sodium and which ones are better to consume, and the recommended daily amounts as well. So potassium is highly, highly underconsumed in our diet, and because of our our diet that's so high in sodium, it actually makes our low intake of potassium even worse because it needs to balance out. So our muscles, as far as exercise is concerned, our muscles cannot contract without calcium, sodium, and potassium. And they can't relax without magnesium. So these guys are pretty important players in the exercise scene. Any imbalances or deficiencies in these minerals can lead to either muscle weakness, or it can also lead to excessive contraction. So a good example I had here. So if you're dehydrated, for instance, it can lead to deficiencies or imbalances in these electrolytes. Excessive urination that can be caused by caffeine or certain medications that, like diuretics medications, or that have diuretic properties to them, can excrete more minerals. I mentioned before trying to buffer the acidity from an acid diet or acid components in your diet. They're going to help with that. And then poor diet in general. So if you're eating nutrient void or foods, then you're not going to be getting those minerals and those electrolytes to keep basically everything functioning optimally. All right, so when to eat what? And this is a pretty common question, but it's not a simple answer, but I tried to simplify it for just a general idea. So if all types of exercise and levels of intensity aside and levels of competition aside, you need to have a general idea like when you should eat and what you should eat, and to basically give yourself the most energy while you are trying to be active. So if you have a 2 to 4 hour window before your exercise, you want to have a well-rounded meal with complex carbohydrates, moderate protein, and some fat. And that's basically going to give you carbohydrates that are going to be working as going into stores for glycogen, protein for muscle synthesis, and then some healthy fat for all of the functions in the body there. If you only have, let's say, 30 minutes to an hour, 30 minutes to 2 hours before your exercise, you don't have as much time for digestion. So you really want to limit or focus on easier to digest foods, and those are carbohydrates. So if your window is a little bit shorter, then you'd want to have some complex with a blend maybe of simple carbohydrates, a little bit less protein, and then minimal fat. So let's say you were having some almonds or some oats, for instance, and you wanted to throw some apples on there and some cinnamon. You could throw a couple almonds or a couple walnuts. That would be great. That would be a good amount of fat, but you want the bulk of your meal at that time to be carbohydrate. If you have 30 minutes or less before you exercise, this is when you'd want to have a simple carbohydrate and maybe a small amount of protein. So this would be a good time to have a smoothie with a small amount of protein with fruit or some like lighter vegetables, for instance, but you wouldn't really want to have fat at this point because you're not going to have enough time to digest it before you exercise. And you really want the blood to be flowing to your working muscles during exercise as opposed to your digesting organs. So during exercise, obviously water. Water is going to be important no matter how long you're exercising for. So typically if you're, and this is going to depend person to person, but if you're working out for 45 to 60 minutes, just water should be okay. If you have an early morning workout and you ate 12 hours before and you didn't have a snack before you went out for your exercise, then you might need something more substantial than just water, but water should be enough for that length of time. During exercise that's going to last 60 minutes or longer, you definitely want to have water. You want to have electrolytes. And then depending on how long you're going for, you want to start adding in some simple carbohydrates. So let's take a marathon, for instance. Depending on how long, the average person runs it in about 4 hours. So if that's the case, then basically, remember what I said about your glycogen being gone in 2 hours? Halfway through, your fuel source is gone. Now, most people who are at that stage have really good fat burning capabilities, so their body switches to burning fat and it sort of reserves the glycogen to last and be used longer. But you can consume some simple carbohydrates. Now, there are a lot of products out on the market, gels and little protein bursts and things like that that you can consume. And depending on what you're doing, you might need those, you might require those, but just make sure you read the ingredients and keep it clean and make sure that you can tolerate it, you can digest it while you're exercising, because nothing worse than trying something in the middle of a marathon and getting a cramp and seizing up. That's terrible. And as I mentioned before, BCAAs, specifically leucine, there's a lot of research being done now on the effectiveness of leucine being used as fuel during exercise. So that's another one. MCTs are really easy to digest, and they can be digested in an aerobic environment. So MCT, so coconut water during exercise is usually well tolerated. It doesn't upset the stomach, and it can provide you with fuel as well as electrolytes. So that's another good option if you're doing more than 60 minutes. Some people do recommend a little bit of protein. I would keep it really, really, really small and test it out first. If you can tolerate it, it could upset your stomach a little bit, and it could cause you to cramp up. So just if it works for you, then that's great, but it would only be a small amount. If you're consuming anything during exercise, you want to make sure that it's an easy to digest carbohydrate. And afterwards, so within 20 minutes following the completion of your exercise, you'd want to have some simple carbohydrate and some protein in a 4-to-1 ratio. And the reason for this is because you have a specific window after you stop exercising where your body is really efficient at converting and storing glycogen. So you want to take advantage of that window. So 20 minutes, you want to have that 4-to-1 ratio. Within 60 minutes after that, you want to have some more carbohydrate with a slightly more amount of protein and just a tiny bit of fat. And then within 2 hours after that, you'd want to have a well-balanced meal. Now, I mentioned before, you don't want to have to schedule everything down and then be restricted to, oh, I have to eat now and I have to do this now. You need to make it fit into your lifestyle. It might mean that you adjust the time of day that you exercise, if that's possible. It might mean that you just change the way you fuel to better accommodate the energy requirements that you do have. One thing I didn't mention during exercise is fructose. Fructose is a simple sugar, but or simple carbohydrate, but it can cause gastric upset. So I don't typically recommend that my clients use or consume fruit during exercise. It's great to have before and it's great to have after. And you can have some fruit juice during if it's diluted, but it's typically not something that I recommend during because it can cause some stomach upset. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on some bad habits that we should quit, whether exercise is new to you or you've been exercising for a while and you might not be sure whether you should or shouldn't be doing something anymore. We can kind of lose track of why we do things. But not eating before or after workout. I touched on the importance of your glycogen stores and refueling and the importance of that, so that's really important. Consuming high sugar protein bars, they're everywhere. They're mostly delicious and they're so quick and convenient that it's so easy to be like, oh, I just worked out, I need protein, I need a protein bar. And if that's there for you, then you'll grab it. The problem with that is that they're usually full of undesirable sugar, so refined sugars. They usually have a lot of ingredients and things that you don't want. So typically steer clear of those guys. Eating whatever you want because you worked out. I've definitely been guilty of this in the past. But that's not the point. That's not why we're working out. We're not working out so that we can, eat that plate of nachos or eat those extra 20 chicken wings. We're exercising because we're trying to be healthy and we want to, keep our body in good shape so that it takes care of us as we get older. So that's something that I really want people to think about, because it's pretty easy to, after you have a nice big hard workout, you go and then you have a beer, you have some deep fried food, and you're just putting horrible fuel back into your body, which then is going to affect your workout the next time you go out. Skipping out on your vegetables. That's kind of a no-brainer. We touched on the importance of vegetables before. They're full of minerals, and minerals are your electrolytes. They're also full of fiber, which keeps you regular, helps you maintain a healthy microbiome, helps support your immune system. Skimping on sleep. Sleep is extremely important because you rejuvenate overnight, you reset, you relax, you do a lot of muscle building while you're asleep. You do a lot of detox while you're asleep as well. So very important to not skimp out on that. Not drinking enough water. I am definitely guilty of this, and I got myself an app so that I could make sure that I'm drinking. I set myself up for 12 cups a day. But if you're eating lots of vegetables and fruit, you're drinking herbal tea, you're making soups and things like that, lots of leafy green vegetables, you're probably getting extra water through your day. So as long as you aim for 8 cups, that's a good rule of thumb. And energy drinks. These guys I typically don't ever recommend for anybody. There's really nothing good about these at all. So try and get rid of those guys. Some of these might be a little bit repetitive, but some foods that you want to avoid. Highly processed refined carbohydrates. So anything that's white flour made, white rice, like anything frozen or like pre-made, packaged, canned, that sort of stuff. You want to avoid those guys. You want to avoid unhealthy fats. So anything that's hydrogenated, vegetable oils, margarines, things like that are not good for you. They're very detrimental for heart health, and they are just nasty in your body. Deep fried foods, you want to kind of reduce and limit those. Poor quality protein. So I talked a little bit about whey protein not being of great quality, but there's also kind of lesser quality food protein sources out there as well. Convenience foods, so prepackaged, pre-made, prepared, things like that. Energy drinks, there again. Alcohol, depending on your level of athleticism is going to determine how often you consume alcohol. It's 7 calories per gram, so it's almost as much as fat, but more than carbohydrate and protein. But it's empty calories. Those calories do you no good whatsoever. It also dehydrates you as well, and that's going to further deplete your electrolytes. So it's really, really not good all the way around. Excess caffeine. We want to make sure that, we just limit our caffeine. If you're going to have caffeine, I recommend a green tea or a yerba mate because they have wonderful antioxidant properties to them, and they are a more mellow caffeine, and they do have other health benefits to them as well. So protein bars, this is kind of like the protein bars that I mentioned before. The only scenario where this would be okay is if you make it yourself, and if you've just finished a workout and you don't have anything else available to you. So you really don't want to miss out on that window to replenish your glycogen. So if a protein bar or homemade protein bar is all that you have handy, then go for it, because you really need to replenish. That's more important at this point. Junkie protein powders, mentioned that before. And then supplements that make health claims. I guess all supplements kind of make health claims, but there's definitely a lot out there that say, I'm going to make you stronger, or I'm going to increase your speed and all this. So anything that has that on the bottle, steer clear of that. So I'm just going to go over some of my favorite supplements here, and feel free to ask me questions about these afterwards. There's so many different supplements that a lot of people recommend, and no, not everybody needs to take supplements, but depending on what you're doing, depending on your diet, depending on your lifestyle, your stress levels and things like that, your hereditary predisposition to diseases, things like that might warrant taking a supplement. So spirulina and chlorella are blue-green algae that I am a huge fan of. They're great to add into smoothies. They're very vibrantly green. They're full of chlorophyll, B vitamins, protein, antioxidants. They're really wonderful. So they're called superfoods, and I highly recommend looking into something like that if you need a boost in your morning smoothie. Collagen. Collagen is phenomenal for joint support. It really, really helps with articular cartilage, and also skin and hair and nails, which is what a lot of people come in for collagen for, and they leave with less back pain and less stiff knees and more motion in their shoulders, rotation in their shoulders, which is fantastic. So I love collagen. Probiotics, in order to support your immune system, it's really important to have a good, strong microbiome, and probiotics are key for that. You can get some probiotics from food, fermented foods like kimchi, kombucha, miso, things like that, but a lot of people, myself included, I need to take a probiotic supplement just to keep that up. You don't need to take it all the time. You can take it intermittently. You can cycle it through, get a good variety of different bacteria going through your body to help basically not let the bad bacteria in. Mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms are fantastic for all sorts of things, but basically they're phenomenal for your immune system. They're fantastic for energy levels, and they're also powerful antioxidants as well. So there's a lot of research being done on mushrooms right now. I highly recommend popping into a NutriChem location and chatting with one of us about the benefits of taking mushrooms. Fish oil is really, really, really great for anti-inflammatory. It's also really good, as I mentioned before, for heart health, and it's very lubricating for the joints as well. So for anybody who's physically active and is experiencing joint pain, it's a good idea to practice some fish oil. It looks like I'm running out of time here, so I should probably wrap it up so I can get to some of your questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them into the question box here. Maybe I'll just keep going here. Turmeric, if you're not familiar with turmeric, it's a root that's very, very bright orange and contains curcumin, which is very powerful anti-inflammatory. So it's a really nice natural anti-inflammatory that you can take if you're sore after a workout or if you're injured and you're on the road to recovery. Antioxidants are very important for athletes because as you exercise, you are creating free radicals in the body. So antioxidants help sort of keep those under control and make sure that they don't wreak havoc on your system. You can find antioxidants in brightly colored fruits and vegetables, but you can also find it and take it in the supplement form as well. Magnesium is great for pretty much everything. It's very important for heart health, but it's also really good for muscle relaxant and sleep. Electrolytes, we touched on those before. So some people you can definitely take an electrolyte supplement if you need to just basically beef up what you're not getting in your diet. And protein powder, as I mentioned before, it's not necessary for everyone, but it might be a good idea if you're not able to get in the amount of protein that you need in your day. Does anybody have any questions at all? Oh, perfect. Here we go. Oh, it looks like my sister's online. Hey, Miriam. Is magnesium okay to take every day? Yes, absolutely. Magnesium is required and used in so many different processes in the body that it's very difficult to take too much. It doesn't accumulate in your system either, so it's not something you need to be worried about toxicity for. You can take too much magnesium, absolutely. Your body will let you know when too much is too much, and you just have to dial it back a little bit. But there's definitely phenomenal reasons to take magnesium every day. As I mentioned, it's fantastic for sleep, absolutely wonderful for muscle relaxing. It's good for constipation as well, if anybody's experiencing any constipation, and crucial for heart health. So best sources for electrolytes in whole foods. So I would say your vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are going to be your best bet because they're minerals, and a lot of minerals are found in vegetables as well as grains. So depending on the way you're eating, if you're consuming grains or nuts and seeds, and you're getting some from there, but the best sources are going to be from vegetables. And that's one reason why buying organic is a really good way to go, or local local organic when possible, because the soil, the food sources are, or sorry, the soil that's grown in are abundant, more abundant in minerals, and they're going to be passed on into the food that you're going to consume. Oh, hey, Erin. One of my friends from Nova Scotia is that I went to high school with is online. Hey, Erin, nice to see you, or see your words. Thanks so much, everybody. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'll stick around for a few minutes if you do. My colleague Christina was wondering if there's any effects of ingesting too much protein or not enough protein. And absolutely, just like consuming too much carbohydrate, too much protein can actually be converted and stored as fat as well. And there can be issues of uric acid buildup too. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. You're not eating too much. And not eating enough is definitely going to leave you weaker. You won't be able to you probably won't have as much muscle mass as well, and you could have a depleted immune system, because protein is part of the building blocks. Aminos are part of the building blocks for your immune system. So yeah, definitely detrimental effects to having too little or too much. Great question here. Somebody was asking why, when looking at protein supplements, what is essential and what should I avoid? So I highly recommend going to a place that you trust, and I would definitely ask questions. So find, like, let's say you're interested in a whey protein. But you want to find out, where is it sourced from? Where are the cows from? Are they grass-fed? Very important, because the amino complex of a grass-fed whey is going to be much different from a corn or straw-fed cow. You want to make sure that it's free of additives, artificial colors, artificial sweeteners, sugar, nasty ingredients like that. You want to make sure that it's hormone and antibiotic certified free. Ideally, if it can be organic, that would be fantastic. But if you're getting, good, clean, grass-fed whey without any additives or ingredients, then you're probably okay with that. As far as plant-based proteins go, again, you kind of want to ask the same questions. Is it organic? Where is it from? Is it GMO? That's a big thing for grains and nuts and seeds these days. So you want to make sure it's not GMO, seed grown. Okay. Is it okay to take every day too? And if so, how much? Selenium. So I think that this question is in regards to selenium. So it's a good idea when you're taking a mineral supplement to double check with your practitioner. So whether you're working with a medical doctor, a naturopathic doctor, nutritionist, dietitian, whoever, just find out basically, what, like, how long should you be taking something? Why are you taking it? And how long should you take it for? Selenium on a daily basis for a short period of time would be okay. It's a powerful antioxidant. I would say you'd want to be looking at 100 to 200 micrograms tops, unless a practitioner recommended any more. But you'd want to be following up with them on a regular basis just to find out that you're not taking too much. You can get selenium toxicity. You'll usually get headaches. So if you're eating Brazil nuts every day and you can't understand why you're getting headaches all the time, you're probably getting too much selenium or too much fat. So definitely something to think about there. Food consumption recommendation the same for aerobic than strength training. It's going to be a little bit different, definitely. Strength training is usually short bursts of exertion. So you do require more carbohydrate for that. So you'd probably want to be consuming more simple carbohydrates immediately before and then throughout the strength training workout. And you probably need slightly more protein as well afterwards for replenishing and rebuilding your muscles and your tissues. For aerobic, the focus is really on complex carbohydrate and fat, healthy fat throughout the day with moderate protein, and then just the simple carbohydrates depending on the length of your exercise. Okay. So I have a question, a recommended protein powder for a person with moderate exercise routine who doesn't tend to eat a lot of protein. I do. I would probably recommend, depending on your sensitivities, if you're not looking to build too much muscle mass, like a moderate exercise routine, you're probably not looking to bulk up. I'd probably recommend a plant-based protein, and I'd probably recommend a blend. So look for something that has a combination of hemp and rice and pea or pumpkin seed protein, sunflower seed protein. There are some really great ones out there on the market. So I would just, some health food stores will have sample packs that you can take home and try. Otherwise, a lot of people do struggle with getting enough protein. Like there's usually, you either eat too much or you eat too little. So what I typically recommend is find a protein powder that you can digest, that you enjoy, and then use that in your other foods so that you're not constantly drinking a protein shake. Make a protein ball, make a protein trail mix bar, add protein powder to your oatmeal, add it to your soups, add it to anything. It's really easy to sneak it into food, and if you buy an unflavored one, chances are you probably won't even taste it at all. Okay, well, I think that's it for questions. Thank you everyone for joining me this evening. If you do have any questions, sorry I didn't, I forgot to put an end slide, but you can email me at saintlaurent@nutrichem.com. And if you have any questions at all in regards to the webinar or anything moving forward, you can just shoot an email and let me know. We do see patients between the two locations, between the three of us, and you can call either location to set up a consultation with any of us. And yeah, that's wonderful. Have a great evening, everyone. And if anybody's training or getting ready for any races this winter, I hope to see you out and about. Have a great night.